how did the ideas of Karl Marx lead to Stalinism? So this particular implementation,
Yeah.
um, is there something fundamental to these ideas that leads to a dictator and that leads to atrocities? There's something about the mechanism of the bureaucracy that's built that leads to um, a human being that's able to attain, integrate uh, absolute power, and then start abusing that power, all that kind of stuff. Like some of the history of the
Yeah.
20th century, is that inextricably connected to the ideas of Karl Marx?
I think to some extent it is, but I'm going to also say that if it hadn't been for the Bolsheviks interpreting Marx and saying we can reach socialism without going through capitalism, then it might not have happened. So if you look at the Mensheviks were a rival political group in Russia, and that's where Hyman Minsky, who's a huge inspiration for me.
So he's an economist who was can we take a little tangent? Who was Hyman Minsky?
Yeah, Hyman Minsky was the person who developed an analysis of capitalism based on financial instability.
Mm-hmm.
And he was actually the PhD student of Joseph Schumpeter and an Austrian economist as well, whose name I've forgotten temporarily. And he asked him, his parents were both refugees from Russia during the Stalinist period because the Mensheviks were being wiped out in Russia, just like any other opponents to the Bolsheviks were being eliminated. So I think his parents met in Chicago, still remained socialist, still remained politically active, and he was educated in a family that was just imbued with Marx as its vision. He ended up fighting in the Second World War on the American side, coming back to America and studying mathematics, and then also doing an economics degree leading to a PhD. And the question he posed for himself is, what causes Great Depressions? And he put it beautifully. He said, can it happen again, it being the Great Depression? And if it can't happen, then what has changed between the society before the First, Second World War and after that makes a depression impossible?
Mm-hmm. What's the answer to those two questions? Can it happen
His answer
again?
was yes, it can happen again. But what has prevented it happening by the time he started writing about it, which was the late 50s to the mid 80s, late 80s. We met once, but only once.
Over a beer? Over a beer? Or?
No, he gave a seminar at New South Uni, and he's a bit of an obstreperous bastard.
What a stripper?
Obstreperous.
Wow, what is it?
It means argumentative and likely to dismiss you. So, like a good mate of mine was the guy I brought him out to Australia. A guy called Graham White. G'day, Graham. We're still good mates.
G'day, Graham. God, I love your language and your accent.
It's a great. Actually, there's a really good TikTok I saw earlier today with an Aboriginal guy saying he loves the Australian language because it's absolutely ironic. You ask an Australian a question, and he'll give you an answer which is the opposite of what he means, and you've got to work out the rest for yourself.
Yeah.
So he goes up to another Aboriginal mate and says, "G'day, mate." He says, "How are you doing?" "Oh, not bad." "What have you been doing recently?" "Oh, not much." "When are we going?" It's not too far, not too soon.
Yeah.
Whereas not too far away. And it's all negatives, and he's a beautiful, beautiful rendition.
Yeah, yeah. That's the cool thing about the internet culture.
They appreciate that ironic side. Like, for example, the best compliment you can give as an Aboriginal to somebody else is, "That's deadly."
That's deadly.
That's a compliment. That's deadly. Okay.
Yeah.
Another mate of mine, this comes to the Australian language. If I call you a bastard, that's a compliment.
Yeah.
Depending on how I intonate the word bastard.
Bastard, that's deadly.
Yeah.
I love that. And there's something about the British accent that makes people sound maybe brilliant, maybe sophisticated,
but actually
wise.
Pompous.
Yeah. No, that's unfortunately the downside of that.
Yeah.
You can sound pompous. There's something about the Australian accent that you just can't sound brilliant. It humbles you. You sound like you're having a lot of fun. There's wit. There's all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But you just can't be like Karl Marx in an Australian accent would just not come off.
That is a very good point.
He would not be able to pull off the beard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's it's fascinating that the accent determines, you know, something about the person. Maybe it's the chicken and the egg too. It drives the way of the discourse. Obviously, there's a lot of brilliance. There's a lot of brilliance in your work.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you're always having fun.
Yeah, and like this, Poncho's got a lot of Australian mates here.
Yeah.
He spent what about a month? How long in Australia? Year and a half, and he's got all these mates who plays Aussie rules football in Austin.
Nice.
You should join them one day.
Oh, whoa. It
It's actually
sounds rough.
it's a very creative sport. It's much more fun.
It's different than rugby.
Oh, very. Rugby is hopeless. Rugby is two morons smashing their bodies against each other.
Easy now.
Sorry.
We do not mean to offend the rugby fans in the audience. Well, okay, what's so it's too simplistic.
It's too simplistic. It's. I mean, there's skill in it. I've seen some really skillful rugby union and rugby league players in my day.
Yeah.
But it fundamentally, if you hit somebody hard enough, they go down.
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas in Aussie rules, it's about catching the ball and then kicking the ball and
more skill, less power.
More skill, and and the bodies of the athletes. I can actually get off and measure what a sport is like by the bodies it creates, and you get these incredibly elegant, lithe, muscular forms out of Aussie rules.
Such beautiful words you have in your vocabulary. Lithe, I don't even know, but I'll assume you know what it means, and maybe somebody in the audience. Okay, so all right, fine. We should also mention that you've in your youth, like last year, have had Olympic weightlifting as part of your life. So you're
long time ago.
And like you said, tennis. I also played tennis for many, 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 many years.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a fascinating game.
It's a wonderful game. Yeah, that's my favorite game.
Karl Marx and Stalin.
Yeah.
So how do we get onto Aussie football and Australian and the accent?
I'm not really sure. You talked about the way I said something about Karl Marx and would Karl Marx. Anyway, we got there.
Yeah, we got there, and now we return.
But back to Marx, I think
it's not the destination.
I think Marx, the failure of socialism with Janos Kornai captured beautifully this idea what he called demand-constrained versus resource-constrained economies.
Mm-hmm.
And capitalism is demand-constrained. Okay, and this is again where neoclassical theory is completely wrong, empirically completely wrong. So the neoclassicals have a vision of capitalism being resource constrained, and it's about maximizing your usage of resources subject to constraints. And as Kornai said, that's really what happened under socialism. What happens under capitalism is that you have 15, 20 companies producing automobiles. Mm-hmm. They are all trying to capture as much of the market as they can. If you add up their marketing plans, you're going to get 120, 130% of the actual market. So they're all going to have excess capacity. When you build a factory, you're building it with a plan for it to exist for 5, 10, 15 years. You have to have excess capacity in the factory. So that means that capitalism has a far greater productive capacity than it actually uses. And then the way that you manage to get demand into your factory is to innovate and produce something nobody else does. Or you're producing in volume, and when somebody produces like a bung tire, comes out of Firestone, then Goodyear is ready to expand its production and take advantage of that. So that's the actual nature of competition in capitalism. And that means that we get a cornucopia of goods, even if we're lowly workers. The variety of goods in capitalism is overwhelming. And that's just doesn't happen in socialism. You get your 1942 Cossack as your motorbike. That's it. When you put your money down to buy a refrigerator, it'll arrive in 10 years because the factory's already fully constrained. So all these resource constraints mean that people aren't happy under socialism. And if you've got a whole bunch of people that aren't happy, then the best way to control them is to suppress them. So I think in that sense, ultimately, yes, it does lead to something like Stalinism.
So it's easier to give happy people freedom.
Yeah, I mean, happy people get pretty silly outside. I'm not particularly the extent to which Americans overuse and distort the word freedom drives me balmy.
Well, but all of these words can be distorted, but they all, at the core, have some fundamental power and beauty, and then we just distort on the surface for the fun of it.
Yeah,
just start battles on Twitter and so on.
But what citizens of the Soviet world didn't feel was freedom.
Yeah.
Not just first of all, it wasn't freedom to buy commodities. The commodities were supposed to be on the shops weren't there. The volume couldn't be produced. And what you then got out of that as well was the classic Soviet joke, they pretend to pay us and we pretend to work. Okay. So
Yeah,
you
so
get,
you're not motivated.
oh, look, I went to Cuba about 8 years ago,
Yep.
invited to give a talk there, and I was staying in a hotel. Itself, the hotel's a story. There's one day my meetings were cancelled, so I thought I might go down to the beach. And they had in the hotel they had a wing which is the tourist office, and there were 3 women working inside the office. So I
Yeah.
thought I'd just go up and ask them, how do I get to the beach? And one of them says to me, and I stood there, just stood in the room, waiting to see if they'd make eye contact with me.
Mhm.
3 women, nobody else in the place. None of them looked at me. So I finally went up to one of them and said, I want to go to the beach and do some surfing. Where she said, I can get a taxi outside. Now, fundamentally, she was saying, well, I'm being paid shit money here. I don't want to work. I'm not going to do anything apart from sit here and qualify for my time. And as much as there are reasons the Cubans have suffered from American embargoes and all that sort of stuff, you've still got that fundamental shortage economy that Cornet spoke about coming out of the structure of central ownership and central control of distribution and investment.
Breaks my heart because I think some of the effects of that persist throughout time. It become part of the culture too.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very interesting.
Negative culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, from the Western perspective.
Well, even from the people living through it. I mean, like I had enough conversation with Cubans, meeting them on the street, hopping in a cab. There was one guy I was talking to who he was an industrial chemist, and he got a better money being a cab driver because he could make money out of taking foreign tourists from the airport to the city.